The wind had a way of howling across Caleb Turner's ranch like it was mourning something long dead. Maybe it was mourning him. For 12 years, Caleb had worked the dry Wyoming land alone. His boots carving the same paths from barn to pasture, to cabin until the earth itself seemed tired of his footsteps. He was 38, broad-shouldered, quiet as a winter dusk, and known across Red Creek as a man who spoke more to cattle than to people. Folks said he wasn't unkind, just hollowed out. His wife had died during childbirth a decade ago, and the baby had followed her before sunrise. Since then, Caleb Turner had buried more than his family. He had buried his laughter. He had buried his hope. He had buried every soft part of himself beneath grit and dust and the steady rhythm of ranch work. But even the hardest men grow weary of silence. And silence was all that waited for him each night inside that small wooden house. The idea came to him not as desire, but as desperation. It arrived in the form of a newspaper advertisement from Cheyenne. Respectable women seeking honest husbands for marriage. Arrangements negotiable. He had read it 3 times by lantern light. Jaw tight, heart uncertain. Buying a wife felt wrong, cold, transactional, like trading livestock. But so was loneliness. So was eating supper alone every night at the same empty table. So was waking to no voice but wind. He told himself he wasn't buying love. He was buying companionship. Partnership. Maybe even redemption. So he saddled his horse and rode 2 days to town. That's where he saw her. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore, and she did not look like the others. While several women sat stiffly beside the matron arranging introductions, Eleanor stood near the window, sunlight catching copper strands in her dark hair. She wasn't dressed in expensive lace, nor did she smile sweetly at every man who passed. She stood straight, watching, measuring. When Caleb's boots crossed the wooden floor toward her, she did not lower her gaze. "You're here to purchase a wife?" she asked plainly. Caleb flinched at the word purchase. "I'm here to offer a home," he said. Her eyes, gray as coming rain, studied him. "A home isn't walls. It's terms." He blinked. "Terms?" "Yes." She stepped closer. "I will marry you. I will keep your house. I will share your table. But there is one condition." He should have laughed. He was the buyer. He was the ranch owner. Yet something in her voice made it clear, this was no ordinary negotiation. "And that is," he asked, "you will never treat me as property." The room seemed to quiet around them. She continued, steady and unafraid. "No raised hand. No drunken rage. No ownership over my thoughts. I will be your wife, but not your possession. If you cannot promise that, I will walk away now." Caleb stared at her. In her words, he heard no rebellion. No arrogance. Only dignity. He nodded once. "You have my word." She extended her hand. "Then we have an agreement." The wedding was small, quick, legal. No romance filled the ceremony. Only necessity. Yet when Eleanor climbed into the wagon beside him for the long ride back to his ranch, Caleb felt something shift inside his chest. Not love. Not yet. But possibility. The first weeks were awkward as a foal learning to stand. They moved around each other carefully, like strangers sharing borrowed space. Eleanor rose before sunrise, tied her hair back, and worked without complaint. She cleaned years of dust from corners Caleb hadn't noticed. She planted wildflowers near the porch. She hummed softly while baking bread. The cabin changed. The ranch changed. And without realizing it, Caleb began changing too. One evening, he returned from repairing fences to find Eleanor sitting at the table. A book open before her. "You read?" he asked, surprised. "Yes," she replied gently. "I also teach." He frowned. "Teach?" "There are children in Red Creek with no schoolhouse." No letters. No future beyond cattle and dust. I intend to change that. He stiffened. That town's none of our concern. It is if we live in it. He removed his hat slowly. You made one condition before marriage. She met his gaze calmly. This isn't a condition. It's purpose. Purpose. The word struck him harder than it should have. Over the next month, Eleanor began walking into town twice a week. Gathering children beneath the oak tree near the general store. Teaching them letters drawn in dirt. At first, townsfolk whispered. A rancher's bought bride playing schoolteacher. It didn't fit the script. But children came. And they learned. Caleb watched from a distance the first time. He saw how gently she corrected them. How fiercely she believed in them. How she looked alive. That night, he asked quietly, "Why does it matter so much to you?" She hesitated, then spoke the truth. My father believed women shouldn't read. Shouldn't speak loudly. Shouldn't dream beyond marriage. He arranged my first engagement without asking me. I ran. I will not belong to a world that cages minds. Caleb absorbed that. And you think teaching changes that? I know it does. That was the night he realized something powerful. He hadn't bought a wife. He had married a storm. And storms change landscapes. By autumn, Red Creek had its first real schoolhouse, a simple structure built with lumber. Caleb donated and sweat he personally poured into every nail. He never announced it. Never bragged. But he built it. And when Eleanor saw it standing tall against the prairie sky, her eyes filled with tears. You did this. She whispered. He shrugged. Seemed important. She stepped forward and, for the first time, touched his face gently. Thank you. That touch did something to him no transaction ever could. It broke the last of his loneliness. But change never comes without challenge. One evening, a wealthy cattle baron named Horace Whitaker rode into town. He had heard of the educated woman stirring ideas among ranch hands and their families. He didn't like it. Education made workers question wages. Question power. Question men like him. He confronted Caleb outside the saloon. Your wife's causing trouble. She's teaching children, Caleb replied evenly. She's teaching rebellion. Caleb's jaw tightened. Then perhaps rebellion needed teaching. Whitaker smirked. Careful, Turner. You bought her. You can silence her. The words burned. Bought her. Silence her. Caleb stepped closer, voice low and dangerous. I didn't buy her to own her. And no man tells my wife who she can be. Whitaker rode off, but the threat lingered like distant thunder. That night, Caleb told Eleanor everything. She didn't look afraid. Change always frightens men who benefit from stillness, she said. He studied her, realizing something profound. She had changed him first. Before her, he had been still. Silent. Surviving. Now he was choosing. Choosing to defend. Choosing to build. Choosing to stand. Winter crept across the prairie, but the ranch felt warmer than it ever had. And though Caleb had once believed he was purchasing companionship, he now understood the truth. He had been given something far greater. A partner. A purpose. And a love that would demand courage. But neither of them knew yet how much courage it would take. Because Whitaker was not a man who accepted change quietly. And the coming storm would test every promise. Caleb Turner had made. Snow fell hard the night they tried to burn the schoolhouse. Caleb smelled smoke before he saw flames. He ran through the drifts, boots slipping. Heart pounding like it had 10 years earlier in a different panic. By the time he reached the building, 2 masked riders were galloping into the darkness. The fire licked hungrily at the wooden walls. And Eleanor stood there, throwing buckets of snow, coughing, refusing to step back. Get away from it. Caleb shouted. She ignored him. So he grabbed a shovel and joined her. They fought the flames together. Side by side. When it was over, the building was scarred but standing. Eleanor's hands were blistered. Caleb's coat was burned at the sleeve. But the schoolhouse remained. Inside that smoke-stained room, something shifted again between them. "I won't stop," she said hoarsely. "I know," he replied. She looked at him carefully. "You don't regret marrying me?" He almost laughed. "Eleanor, before you came, I was alive. That's all. Just alive. Now, I'm awake." Her breath caught. "You changed my life," he continued. "Not because you demanded respect, but because you demanded meaning." Tears slipped down her soot-streaked cheeks. And for the first time since their wedding, he kissed her, not from obligation, not from loneliness, but from love. The attack backfired. Townfolk rallied behind the school. Ranch hands offered lumber. Mothers brought food. Even men who once mocked the idea now defended it. Whitaker tried intimidation again, but Caleb confronted him publicly. "You burned that school again," Caleb said calmly before a crowd, "and you answer to all of Red Creek." It wasn't just a rancher speaking. It was a leader. Whitaker backed down. Because power shifts when people stand together. Spring arrived bright and defiant. The schoolhouse reopened stronger than before. And Caleb Turner, once the loneliest man on the prairie, stood in the doorway, watching children recite the alphabet. Eleanor joined him. "You didn't just give me freedom," she said softly. "You protected it." He shook his head. "You gave me something better than freedom." "What's that?" "A reason." Years later, when travelers passed through Red Creek, they spoke not of cattle numbers or land disputes, but of the rancher and the teacher, who built something lasting. Their marriage was never about purchase. It was about promise. And the one condition that changed everything wasn't simply that she refused to be owned. It was that she refused to live small. And in loving her fully, Caleb learned he didn't have to live small either. He could grieve, and still hope. He could fear, and still stand. He could love, and not lose again. Because love built on respect does not weaken a man. It remakes him. So if you believe in stories where strength meets dignity, where love grows from unlikely beginnings, and where the Wild West isn't just about gunslingers but about courage of the heart, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to Wild West Tales for more unforgettable frontier stories, where every storm carries transformation, and every lonely soul might just find redemption on the open range. Out here on the prairie, survival is common. But purpose is rare. And sometimes, it begins with one brave condition.